Hello, friends. It's good to be with you and to record this update that follows our second week of Sunday school lessons as we think about cultivating a resilient life through faith in the midst of difficult circumstances. And this week we turn to the prophet Amos and kind of specifically skip forward to him as a minor prophet because of the way that his ministry and his prophecies were carried forward and really like given context into our time by Dr. King, whose weekend and birthday and celebration we just went through these past few days. So today we'll get to Amos chapter 5 with a little bit of review up into that, and then we'll close with kind of how Dr. King used some of the prophecies of Amos. Now, I joked in the Sunday school class that Amos is one of those books of the Bible that you have to, or at least if you're me, you gotta pull out your table of contents to figure out which page it's on. Because confession that I have two higher level divinity school degrees and still don't have exactly the perfect order of the minor prophets memorized. Pretty good in the New Testament, but the 12 minor prophets are not my strong suit. So we situated Amos first within the table of contents, of course, but then second within sort of the time when he was writing and gave some description to kind of who he was and what he was all about. And so Amos was a shepherd who wrote sort of after David, during a time where the kingdom was divided into northern kingdom and southern kingdom, and Israel was experiencing relative stability, relative economic stability, and they weren't at war with folks. And so Amos is actually writing to a politically secure, economically expanding, religiously active, but deeply unequal group of people. And I think that's why there was both resonance from Amos for the civil rights movement, as well as resonance for our time now. And so Amos is an outsider. He was a shepherd from the southern kingdom who speaks primarily to the northern kingdom around the 8th century before BCE, before Jesus, during a time of peace and tranquility. And what he is saying to the people is that everything is not fine, even though it seems fine for you. Amos fits after Exodus and after they've established themselves in the promised land that they believe God had given for them. But now that you're there, you've reached a destination, but not ultimately the destination, which is everyone having what they all need. And so in the book, as he kind of structures his prophecy leading up to chapter 5, he lays out a period of judgments to different folks. He's turning to some neighbors and kind of speaking against them. And then by chapter 3, he moves into an idea that God is for all the families of the earth, and that truly does mean all the families of the earth. And so being elect and being God's chosen doesn't mean that these people were exempt from the work of caring for others. But they were ignoring others, and they were ignoring signs that the thing that God would have wanted for all of them, there were signs and signals that they were falling short, that people were being exploited economically. There was religious hypocrisy. There were disasters that folks were not helping each other with, and then ultimately the society was kind of breaking down. Which brings us to chapter 5, where his key kind of main audience is implicated. Because they are very confident in their religious methods and modes and what they're doing. However, Amos is saying to them, what you are doing isn't actually doing what it needs to. And so chapter 5 becomes kind of an emotional center, a culmination of the book and of his prophecy, and one in which Amos is not just warning anymore, but he's naming what God wants from them. And so it's a lament, it's a prophetic warning, and it's a vision of what God actually desires by the time we get to Amos chapter 5, verses 18 through 24, which I thought I had ready, but it's in the King James Version. And so I will pull it from this version, which is the CEB, the Common English Bible, which is one I like to use at times. And again, forgive me if you paused or got up to get a soda. Well deserved. If you're admiring the tapestry behind me, that was a gift from some folks I worked on staff with in Mount Airy, North Carolina. So here we go. Amos chapter 5, verses 18 through 24. Doom to those who desire the day of the Lord. Why would you want the day of the Lord? It is darkness, not light. As if someone fled from a lion and was met by a bear, or sought refuge in a house, rested a hand against the wall, and then was bitten by a snake. Isn't the day of the Lord darkness and not night, and dark not brightness in it? I'll pause there at the end of chapter verse 20, because one of the questions we talked about in class was, how is this day of the Lord not good news? Because what we have always heard for all of our time and all of our lives is that, well, when the Lord comes and when God intervenes, like, that's a good thing. But what Amos is doing is sort of cutting the opposite way on when the Lord seeks to come, the Lord seeks to intervene, the Lord seeks to work on the behalf of his people, behalf of God's people. If you're not on the right side of that story, the Lord showing up is bad news. Your hand is in the cookie jar. It's that note that says, come to the principal's office, and you know it's because you did something wrong, not because you were about to make the honor roll. And so Amos starts with this warning and this lament in 18 through 20 that the coming of the Lord is not necessarily always good news if you're not on the right side of what God is calling you to be about. So in 21, he writes, I reject your festivals. I do not enjoy your joyous assemblies. If you bring me your entirely burned offerings and gifts of food, I won't be pleased. I won't even look at your offerings of well-fed animals. Take away the noise of your songs. I won't listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Verse 25, did you bring me sacrifices and offerings during the 40 years in the wilderness? I will take up Succoth, your king, and Kawain, your star god, your images, which you made for yourselves, and therefore I will take away beyond Damascus, is the Lord, whose name is the God of heavenly forces. So what you get in this passage ultimately is, after the warning has come, we have this, I reject your festivals. I don't enjoy your assemblies. You're bringing me offerings that are no good. Because where your worship and your offerings and your assemblies and your celebrations are not forming and shaping you into people who are bringing justice. Instead, they are things you do to make you feel good, not things that you are doing in order to bring about, to things that are forming you into bringing out justice that God is calling God's people to. And so it should be kind of an unsettling passage because we're people who like to go to church. Like, I don't know what else to do on Sunday morning because I'm not going to watch Meet the Press or Face the Nation or whatever else there is that's on. I like to get home by the football game, don't get me wrong, but Sunday morning is a time in which I like to be with a community of faith. It's a way I've been formed. But if the way I've been formed and the forming that I'm doing while I'm there doesn't inform what I do the rest of my life outside of those times of worship, those times of discipleship, those times of fellowship with one another, it's all for naught. And that begins to bridge us to the connection with Dr. King. Amos is not saying that he doesn't like worship. He's fine with worship, but he's not liking worship. He's speaking against judgment, or speaking judgment against folks who worship, but the worship does nothing beyond sort of a self-formation. And so his problem is not with people who believe, but with a disconnect between that which you say you believe and want to do within your congregationally sort of shared worship life at the temple and all of that, but it's not bringing about justice. And so in Amos, justice isn't this abstract ideal. It's not for a motivational poster. Justice is real, it's economic, it's social, and it's communal. Because Amos is much like we might think of in, say, the book of James. Show me your faith without works. I'll show you my faith by what I do. Amos is inviting us to reflect a faith well lived, which connects us then back to Dr. King and the King Day celebration, and why we brought this particular passage about resilience and about justice and judging to this day. In some ways, this passage might not fit perfectly within a resilient life, except to say that if we're going to claim a life of faith and a life of worship and a life of formation in our life and world, then it has to have implications beyond just what we do with the people we share our spiritual lives with. And so Dr. King was very keen on that, in that he, when he calls out white moderate complacency in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, or when he calls for protecting those who have been treated inequitably, or when he is urging folks who have disconnected their faith from their public responsibility, he's using Amos to say a resilient life and a resilient faith is one that has actions beyond just that which we do in our shared congregational life. We had a really good discussion, and several folks brought up different quotes or things they had been working on that were tied to the King Weekend, or projects that were connected to Dr. King. And so it was a real robust discussion. And as much as I'm happy that you've watched my 13, 14 minutes of describing this to you, I think you really missed something by not being with us on Sunday. And so when we think of Amos, we need to, when we reflect on Amos, I think one of the things we need to do is continue to remember for ourselves who might the Amoses be in our world today, who are informing us and calling us to evaluate the ways in which our faith might be more real and more formative of the world around us, not just ourselves within our shared congregational life. I think we also need to remember that justice is not just a political issue, though it gets thrown around in politics a lot, but it is how God is at work among us. And so we need to remember that resilient faith can lead us towards doing justice on behalf of those who need it. And then finally, we need to stay awake to the temptation to ease into complacency, because it is real, especially when you're in a safe spot. Exodus was all about Pharaoh exerting fear and the people exercising resiliency in the midst of a fearful situation. Amos is different. The fear is not on being exercised. Instead, complacency is. And so Amos calls us out into something else. So I hope that summary helps you today. As we look to next week, we're going to actually turn to Jesus for a week, and how and what it means to be resilient in the midst of the familiar, and how he wrestled with that in kind of his first kind of public offering in I think it's Luke chapter 4. As always, it's great to be with you and to have been with you, and I wish you all the best. Please reach out as you have need and as you are able, and if I can be of connection or service to you in whatever way possible. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday, the 25th, and until then, peace and God bless.